There's a copious concentration of culture, art, and artifacts from all around the world, and it's all smack dab in the middle of a major metropolis. This happening haven for art aficionados is just a stone's throw from New York City's iconic Central Park. We'll meander around the amazing mecca known as Museum Mile on this week's episode of FYI. Welcome to For Your Info.
En inglés.
You got it. Hello, and welcome to another exciting edition of FYI. And we are going to go highbrow. De alta, I don't know how you would say this. Highbrow is kind of like an intellectual humor. So this is a highbrow show. We're going to talk about culture, art, and yes, even artifacts. Today we're going to visit Museum Mile, baby. And I'm not talking about the one in London. I had no idea there was a Museum Mile located in London. So when I was preparing this, I said, wait a second. New York City isn't the only city that has a Museum Mile. So let me clear that up right from the get-go. We're going to talk about Museum Mile, New York City. And I don't know about you, but I love going to museums. Let's pronounce the word museums. It's got that sound like easy. Museum. But maybe we'll do an episode in the future on London's Museum Mile. Who knows? You never know. If you guys ask, you shall receive. And while we're on the topic, if you have any ideas for upcoming topics on the show, suggestions, things you'd like to hear, please let me know. You can contact me on social media or just go to my website, albertoalonso.com, and you can find links to everything. Some of the greatest shows have been suggestions from you guys, so keep them coming. Let's start off by taking a look at our intro right now, because there's a copious amount of vocabulary. And I think you know the word copious because I believe it has a Latin root. I said there's a copious concentration of culture. Pronounce it with me, please. Culture, no culture, culture, art, and artifacts from all around the world. And it's all smack dab in the middle. Smack dab in the middle means en todo el meollo in Spanish, of a major metropolis. And then you heard a beep or a honk. They're both onomatopoeic words. Then I said this happening haven. And happening es que está de moda. Hay mucha vida. It's happening. It's lively. And the word haven, I think we've looked at it on past episodes, but the word haven es un refugio. This happening haven, and not to be confused with heaven. Heaven es el cielo. Haven, we take out one of the E's and we change the pronunciation. That means refugio. It's a haven for art aficionados. What? Aficionados? Well, why did I mispronounce it? Well, I'm pronouncing it like we pronounce it. Now, normally we say fans, but you can say aficionados. See, you guys aren't the only ones who copy. We copy you too. Then I said it's just a stone's throw, a tiro de piedra, same expression, a stone's throw, or you could say a hop, skip, and a jump, que es que está al ladito, from New York's iconic Central Park. Then I said we'll meander. To meander is like deambular, callejear, I think you say. It's to walk around aimlessly. You don't have a particular purpose. And I think you know the word mecca. So are you guys ready to discover Museum Mile? Let's start off by talking about museums and New York City in general. I'm going to ask you guys to guess. How many museums do you think there are in New York City? Now, this is give or take, más o menos. What did you say? Did you say 100? Nope, higher. 145 museums in New York City. Now remember, museums are opening up every day and some are unfortunately closing down. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. New York has museums and they've got stuff for everybody. It doesn't matter what you like. It doesn't matter what you're into. There's something for everybody. And we're going to talk about some of the quirkier or lesser known museums in the bonus episode. And I guess this is a good moment to remind you guys that every week you can get a bonus episode. You can get vocabulary sheets that have all the vocabulary that I say, and you can be in class with me. That's right. Once a week, we review the vocabulary from the past week's episode. And then once a month, we have a master class. All of this is happening over on Patreon. If you want to check it out, it's patreon.com/Alberto Alonso. And thank you to everybody who supports what I do and everybody who enjoys what I do. I want to send a shout out to all my patrons, especially my super duper students, Marta, Candy, Javier, Roberto, David, Jose Maria, Mila, Alex, Edgar, and Aina. And don't forget about my interstellar students, Lina, Isa, Paco, Diego, and the lovely Carmen. If you guys want to get some more information about how you can join our curious community, go on over to patreon.com/Alberto Alonso. The moment you sign up, you'll have access to hundreds of posts. Here's my question for you. What are you waiting for? Join us. More information at patreon.com/Alberto Alonso. So I guess we should start by defining Museum Mile. What is Museum Mile? Where is Museum Mile? Well, it's located in the Upper East Side. The Upper East Side is a neighborhood that is on the east side of Central Park. To be a little bit more specific, it's called Carnegie Hill, La Colina de Carnegie. Now, it's not to be confused with Carnegie Hall, the famous place where people play music and there are symphony orchestras. I mean, I think Pavarotti, the Beatles, everybody has played Carnegie Hall. No. This is Carnegie Hill. Now, they're both named after the same person, obviously. And this is a section of Fifth Avenue. And be careful, we don't say 5th, we say 5th. Fifth Avenue between 110th Street and 82nd Street. So it is literally a little patch of land in New York City, in the center of New York City. But if you want to be a stickler, si quieres ser un poco quisquilloso, it's technically 1.4 miles, but that just didn't have the same ring to it. Es que no sonaba igual. Museum 1.4 miles? Nah, Museum Mile sounds perfect. Oh, and speaking of Central Park, we've got an episode on Central Park. If you haven't discovered it yet, give it a listen. But the first thing I would do is a little bit of research, because Museum Mile, even though it's a little bit over a mile, it's huge. There's so much to do. There's so much to see. So you need to figure out what's important to you. Do you want to see a couple smaller museums? Or do you want to spend the day in a museum such as the Met, which is the first one we're going to talk about, and it's probably the most famous one, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, aka the Met. Not to be confused with MoMA, which is the Museum of Modern Art, but that's not on Museum Mile. I'm talking about the famous Met. And I think, as in true New York fashion, we're going to do this in a logical way. We will start downtown and then work our way uptown. New York is so logical. Uptown, downtown, midtown, the east side, the west side. As I just said, the first one is the Met. But there are some people who say if you just go down the block a little bit to 70th Street and 5th Avenue, you have the Henry Clay Frick House, or as it's called, the Frick Collection. And some people say that this should be included in Museum Mile. It isn't, but hey, if you've got a little extra time in your itinerary, you should check it out as well, because they've got works by Bellini, Goya, Rembrandt, Turner, Velázquez, Vermeer, and many, many others. And we haven't even touched Museum Mile yet. It's called the Frick Collection. I'll give you guys all this information over on Patreon. So the first official museum on Museum Mile is the Met. It's located at 1000 Fifth Avenue at 82nd Street. And it is the largest art museum in the Americas. Let's take a guess. How many works do you think they have in their permanent collection? 100? 50,000? 100,000? What about 2 million works? They have 2 million works in their collection, and that is why this is an institution. By area as well, it is one of the world's largest art museums. The building itself, as in many of these that we're going to look at, the building itself is a work of art. And the Metropolitan Museum of Art, or as we lovingly call it, the Met, was founded in 1870. And its mission, I like this, I like to teach this, a mission statement es el objetivo de una empresa o de una organización. Our mission statement is to provide quality English classes, blah, blah, blah. You can check out a lot of companies on their website, they'll have it, our mission statement. And their mission statement is to bring art and art education to the American people. And they've been doing that since 1870. There are all kinds of things in their collection. You've got stuff from ancient Egypt, paintings, sculptures from nearly all the European masters, American and modern art, African, Asian, Islamic art, I mean, you name it. And when I say art, I don't just mean paintings and sculptures. They have musical instruments, antique weapons. I mean, it is absolutely fascinating. There's a reason why it is what it is. It's the Met, and it is the anchor of Museum Mile. Next up, you've got the new gallery. It's kind of old. No, I'm joking. In fact, it is the newest one, as the name suggests. Now, new is spelled in German, so I don't know if I pronounced it correctly in German. I know in English it's new, although I've heard some British people say new, the new gallery, but that sounds a bit pedantic if you ask me. And this is absolutely beautiful. It's located at the William Starr Miller House. It's at 86th Street and 5th Avenue. And it's one of these old mansions / palaces that was turned into a museum. It was established in 2001, and as I said, it is one of the most recent additions to Museum Mile. You can find Klimt there, Kandinsky, and so many others. The next one will be very well known to Spaniards because we have our own Guggenheim. That's right, there's a Guggenheim in Bilbao, but no, I'm talking about the one located at 1071 Fifth Avenue at 89th Street. And this is a building that was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. You guys can hear all about him in our Chicago episode. He's an amazing architect, and he's the one who did Falling Water as well. You know that house that's built into a waterfall? Oh, it's absolutely gorgeous. And it was quite controversial at first. Finally, it was completed in 1959, but it took 15 years to design and build. And the collection has continued to grow, such as the organization as well. I mean, as I said, they're in Bilbao now, and you can find them with collections in many other major cities. They have about 8,000 works in their collection. Next up, we've got the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design. Now, we call it the Cooper Hewitt Museum, and it's located at 2 East 91st Street between 5th Avenue and Madison Avenue. If you've noticed, every address I've given you is like a grid. We always say that. When you ask me, Alberto, where did you live in New York City? I'll say 28th, between 7th and 8th. And this way you can pinpoint exactly where something is. We are logical people. As I said, we come from the Dutch. What's cool about the Cooper Hewitt is it's a hands-on museum. It's one of those museums where you can go and touch things. Because normally, if you go to the Louvre, don't you dare touch anything. In fact, you're not even allowed to use flash photography. But here, you can interact with the exhibits, and that is awesome. It's a place where future engineers or designers or architects are formed. So this museum has a practical element as well, and it's part of the Smithsonian, which, if you recall in our Washington, D.C. episode, we talked about the Smithsonian Institution. And the Smithsonian is exactly that. It's an institution, kind of like National Geographic. If you want to learn more about that, obviously, go over to the Washington, D.C. episode and give it a listen. The next one on our list, and we're moving uptown, as I said, this one is the Jewish Museum. And we can't take the Jewish element out of New York City. They're such a huge part of the building of that city, even now, the city. There's a huge Jewish influence. Well, you can see influence from every culture, but I couldn't imagine New York City without the Jewish influence in food, even in the language. And this is an art museum which is located at 1109 Fifth Avenue at East 92nd Street. ¿Ves? No te vale con decir Fifth Avenue, el número y Fifth Avenue. Tengo que saber a qué altura. And that's something you can only do in New York. Well, any city that is a grid. I know Barcelona has certain parts that are a grid. What's interesting about this museum is it is the first Jewish museum in the United States, as well as the oldest existing Jewish museum in the world. And their collection contains more than 30,000 objects. The collection was established in 1904, but the museum did not open until 1947. Remember, some of these institutions started in somebody's living room, looking at a couple pieces of art, and then, they outgrew the living room, and then they needed bigger spaces until they became institutions. The next one is the Museum of the City of New York. This one is located at 1220 Fifth Avenue at 103rd Street, and they have 1.5 million items. Remember, 1,5 es punto in inglés. 1.5 million items. That is incredible. And most of them, if not all of them, have something to do with New York and the people who settled New York, as well as modern day New York as well. Let's put it this way. If you love all things New York, you have to go to the Museum of the City of New York. You can find photographs featuring New York City residents, costumes, furniture, antique toys. This is the first museum in the world that had a department for toys. That's a great reason to go in and of itself. They've got ship models, rare books, manuscripts. You can find anything and everything, from Broadway memorabilia to stuff from the NYFD, the New York Fire Department. If you love New York, you've got to go there. Then we've got El Museo del Barrio. Well, I'm not going to translate it. That's the name, El Museo del Barrio. And it's located near the northern end of Museum Mile. And this is a museum that was founded in 1969. It specializes in Latin American and Caribbean art. And you'll see a lot of stuff from Puerto Rico. Focuses on the Boricua culture. And it's fascinating. I've been there, and I loved how it meshed the Latin culture with the American culture. Because as we said with the Jewish people, you can't take Latinos and Caribbean people out of New York. It wouldn't be New York. The story would be different. They are a part of the fabric. And last but not least, the Africa Center, formerly known as the Museum for African Art, but now it's called the Center for African Art, or the Africa Center. It's located at 110th Street in East Harlem. And this museum was founded in 1984. It's dedicated to, and I quote, dedicated to increasing public understanding and appreciation of African art and culture. It joined the ensemble, I think that's a French word we use, ensemble, we say ensemble, in 2009. And this was the first new museum constructed on the Mile since the Guggenheim, which was in 1959. And this museum opened in 2012. So as you can see, these museums reflect the diversity that is New York. This is a way of traveling around New York, not just today, but yesterday and in the future, and seeing what New York has to offer. And it's all located in this mile, or mile 0.4, as we said before, of culture, art, artifacts, and amazing things to do. And if you had enough art for the day, you can go on over to Central Park and have a cup of joe. That's right, a cup of joe is a cup of coffee. Hey, wait, we have an episode on coffee too. All right, well, we're gonna wrap up here, but I sure hope you'll join us in the bonus episode where we're gonna talk about the real estate, the price per square meter in Museum Mile. We'll also take a look at movies that took place there, and we'll look at the difference between the Upper East Side and the Upper West Side, as well as fun facts and lesser-known New York City museums. I sure hope you'll join us in the bonus episode of today's FYI.